So good evening, everyone. Am I loud enough? Okay. So I think you can see me now, right? Okay, so we're going to cut to the chase, like they say, and start straight away because we have lots of stuff to cover. I just want to double check that you guys can see the screen because I'm sharing it with you, and then we are on our way. So how do you find the experience with the course so far? We have done a class, and I'm not sure if I have shared the recording with you. Did you get that? Did you get the yeah. Okay, good. Oh, nice, nice. Very favorable reviews. People are happy. Uh, and hopefully we can sustain this happiness, inshallah. Do you have any questions for me before we start? Don't ask me about the exam yet. I mean the TMA, because I have the TMA, by the way. I'm going to post it as soon as we finish today's class. So you don't have to worry. We'll talk about it. It's very interesting. I mean the question, the topic that you guys are being asked is very interesting. All you need to do would be that you read the novel, not the novel, obviously the novels, because like I told you the other day, were the themes and the topics cut across the different novels that we have, and this is interesting in and of itself, like we agreed. Okay, so what do we have today? So have you done any reading? I mean, apart from Kamar and Abdurrahman, Abdurrahman did his best, and obviously he got he switched off because of the length of the novel. Who else? Nabila, I read some chapters but didn't finish it. You're not expected to finish it in one go, ya Nabila, but take it easy. We understand and appreciate. Sarah Al Hariri said that she has read it, and Arij also. You were doing a good job. Yeah, yes. Somebody's yes. I mean, I record it twice, by the way. You don't have to worry if you miss it. You miss the recording on LMS, the LMS recording. We have another recording. Let me just write class 2 and write my name, Dr. Sam. Yeah, it's good. Thank you for reminding me. But like I said, I am recording the class in two different ways. Okay, so Mayar is saying that she read I read the chapter 5 or chapter 5. I don't want us to confuse between the textbook, which is the secondary source, and the book itself or the novel itself, which is the primary source. Okay, people normally start with the primary source. They read it. They read the novel, or if it's a play, or if it's a poem, long or short, and then they make the transition to the secondary sources. Secondary sources would be analysis and reviews and overviews given by critics and other people about the novel. Okay, so we're moving in a parallel way. We're reading, of course, the textbook, and we're also reading the novel. I'm so proud of you. You seem to have done a great deal. I mean, since I left you, was it Sunday? Yeah, since Sunday, or perhaps Monday. Monday, yeah. All I want you to do is I would like you to keep it up. Thank you so much for the interest, for the enthusiasm, and I'm hopeful that through what I'm saying, you wouldn't lose this interest and we can sustain it till the end. Okay, so what do we have today on the agenda? We're going to start with a very quick review of what we have said last time and then make the transition to chapter 5. And chapter 5's title is Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights at Home. Remember, we spoke about this idea of home and abroad, and we said that these are big concepts, and there is obviously more to their meanings and definitions than just the dictionary definition that you may get when you check their meanings up in a dictionary. Let me start, like I said, with the introduction. Remember last time we spoke a lot about the introduction. And normally introductions to chapters are very important. Introductions to courses are also very important. Introductions to books, they save you a lot of time because they kind of capsulize and wrap up the entire argument. So they provide you with some signposts that you would need so that you don't get lost in the chapters. So structurally, an introduction is worth your while, if you like. I mean, if you have introduction, normally you have introductions to novels. You have the novel, of course, and you have the editor of the novel. The editor of the novel is somebody who writes an introduction to the novel, exploring its different aspects, looking at different angles in the novel. You're highly advised to read introductions to novels, should any exist in any of the editions that you may have. Okay, so like I said, the first part of the course would have to do with the Victorian age, and we have 3 representative novels, and those 3 representative novels, I mean, cut across the Victorian age. We have we have something. We have Wuthering Heights, which is perhaps is the earliest, and then we leave Wuthering Heights, which was published in 1847, and we go all the way to the late 19th century, where we have Doyle, who wrote The Sign of 4, and then we conclude the age with The Beach of or in Felisa by Stevenson, which is more or less very close to Doyle's The Sign of 4, because it was written in 1892, 1893. Do they have things in common? I mean, the 3 novels that I am talking about, absolutely, and for the simple reason that they more or less belong to the same century, and values do not change. I mean, values take hundreds of years to change. So you're going to have more or less the same values, with modifications and alterations. Of course, people who lived in 1847, for example, will be different from people in late 19th century, for example. So there are differences, but the differences are not drastic or major, as we are going to see. So the three novels again, you have Wuthering Heights, you have The Sign of Four, and we conclude this part by talking about The Beach in Felicia by Robert Stevenson. Okay, so if you still remember, when we spoke about when we had this introduction last time, the focus was also on this idea of close reading. Um, we in one way or another, and throughout the chapters, are trying to develop a new this close reading sense, and we unpacked the word close reading last time, and we said that close reading means that you read the text closely by having you normally have an extract that is very significant if you compare it to the rest of the extracts in a novel or in a play. It's very revelatory of lots of stuff within the novel, very significant. That's why we approach it very closely. You try to highlight and explore the different aspects in this extract, which is more or less like a mirror that reflects a great deal in the novel in terms of ideas and issues. So you approach this extract or this text thematically and also formally or technically. Thematically means that you try to explore the ideas and the issues presented in this part, and technically and formally means that you read it also from a formal perspective or point of view. By formal, I mean form, from the word form, and form has to do with structure and technique. Okay, so you're trying to kind of uncover how a writer in this extract reached the conclusions that he reached using those techniques and those forms. We'll have examples of that when we do Wuthering Heights. At one point, when we read Wuthering Heights, we can take a part or a paragraph out, and then we start to shed light on it from a technical point of view and also from a thematic point of view. Okay, I'm hopeful that I'm making sense so far. Okay, so this is one of the aims, the idea of close reading, and also one of the other aims would be comparing and contrasting representations of home and abroad. Like I said, we have the three novels that we're dealing with. We're going to look very deeply and very closely at the idea of home and abroad, and we're going to compare how those concepts are presented in these different novels, given also the fact that they were written. It is true that they are all Victorian, but they belong to different periods in the Victorian age. So the treatment and the presentation are bound to differ from one novel to another within, like I said, again against the idea of home and abroad. One of the ideas that we also highlighted was the idea of readership, Victorian readership, and the idea that Victorians during the Victorian age were educated, and educated, by educated I mean they were literate, they could read and write, and if you can read and write, you finish work at perhaps 5 or 6. You have nothing to do. You don't have television or internet. So your internet and your television in the Victorian age would be the book, the newspaper, the magazine, and all these kinds of things. So people were very literate, and they would consume large amounts of books, whether those books are light-hearted or heavy-handed novels like Wuthering Heights. Um, Again, the focus would be on the idea of home and abroad in these three fictional accounts that we have. We need to also remember that these novels were written for domestic readership. Domestic readership means that Bronte and her colleagues, when they wrote their novels, they addressed people in the Victorian age, British people in the Victorian age. So it is only natural that they are going to address issues that those people, grapple with. They would address, you know, topics and subject matter that is very relatable to the reading public of the time. Again, it's only natural that we have ideas like home and abroad, because these were concepts that were widespread and prevalent in the Victorian age, as we are going to see. Again, so it is true that those novels are addressing local readership, the Victorian readers, but they would extend beyond beyond England. Remember, you have to always remember. Yeah, what's the problem? Yeah, somebody is saying voice. Razan, do you have a problem with the voice? Yeah, okay. Okay, that's interesting. Again, I was talking about the Victorian age, and I was saying that the novels may be addressing local Victorian readers, but their themes and ideas may go beyond that, for the simple reason that this was an age of the empire. We're talking about Britain at the time, as one of the biggest, if not the biggest, trading empire at the time. They had Britain had colonies in places as far as India, as far away as India, Africa, the Pacific, North America, and of course the life in back in London and in Britain would get affected by you know, the visits that people make to these places. They come back and they recount their experiences over there. They highlight the differences between the different societies. They talk about what they perceive as strange and weird, and they can do that in books. They can write articles for newspapers. They can write novels or short stories reflecting all these kinds of things. So people would read. So they read local material, and they also read about the colonies and places beyond and out of Britain. Okay, so as I am saying, at the time, because of the high literacy, which was prompted by an Education Act. There was this Educational Act in 1871, and this Educational Act is responsible for the widespread um, literacy that Britain witnessed at the time. So again, people finish work and they go home, and one of the biggest, if not the biggest, source of entertainment would be reading. So writers have to cater for those reading needs of those people. Again, the material that they read about would be local material and also abroad material from abroad. Uh, and the idea of separating whatever is home and whatever is abroad would be a little bit challenging given this interconnection between the two, as you may have noticed. What else do or did we speak about? We spoke about the idea of home, and what the concept of home. We kind of unpacked the concept of home, and we said that home at the time was about safety, comfort, and righteousness. If we talk about home at the time, but these are the associations of the word home at the time. So home should and is safe, comfortable, and righteous. And in order to guarantee all these kinds of things, they would heavily rely on women. They would kind of all the time communicate to women the fact that uh, their only business would be home. Women's only business and only duty is home. They even started to equate home and the duties of home as far as women are concerned with their gender. So they shouldn't aspire beyond that. Their home is their sacred place, and this is how they are defined. Society defines them through or by how close they are to their homes, to the extent that they would at one point consider women not comforting their husbands, not cleaning their houses. They would consider this as a source of discontent or public discontent. Um, okay, so these were ideas that were very widespread at the time, and what made them tenets and principles that people would go by would be that some of the social commentators at the time started to write about them, started to highlight them in their public appearances and in their lectures and books. So one of them happens to be John Ruskin. John Ruskin is a social commentator and is a social philosopher, and he is responsible for this idea that homes are about safety and comfort, and women kind of comforting and pleasing their husbands, obeying them, making sure that they feel happy and they feel satisfied and they feel secure even. Ruskin wrote a treatise. Actually, he gave a number of lectures, and they were later put together in a book, and the book is called Sesame and Lilies. And he spoke about all these ideas, all those women-related ideas. Together with Ruskin, we have somebody else by the name of Coventry Patmore, and Coventry Patmore was a poet at the time, and Coventry Patmore, the poet, is responsible for this very famous phrase that we are now very familiar is the idea of the angel in the house. He would focus in his long. He wrote a poem, a long one, and it's called "The Angel in the House," in which he highlighted how important for women to stay at home and how sacred their duties at home are, and the fact that they shouldn't look beyond that. Again, the idea of equating their gender with their home duties. Uh, um, and it would be out of keeping with their character, according to people like Coventry Patmore. It would be out of keeping of the character of women to think outside their homes. And then we have a domestic management expert that was very famous at the time by the name of Isabella Peaton. And Isabella Peaton wrote a manual in which she teaches women how to behave within the confines of their homes, and how she can win the minds and the hearts of her family members, and even the outside society. If she applies and implements certain principles that this lady is giving in her book. Um, the book that she wrote was very famous at the time, and it sold more than 2 million copies. Um, so again, the idea of home was very related to women, and the limited and the limiting position that she was or they were assigned back at home. Again, the idea of for women to pass off as morally upright, to pass off as respectable and righteous, they have to fulfill their domestic duties. If they do otherwise, they would be accused of all types of accusations. They wouldn't be considered good, whether morally or otherwise. Again, when we talk about women, we talk about the domestic sphere, and this is yani how far they can go. Their social role, like I said, is inseparable from their gender. They are referred to, if they apply and implement their duties, as the angels in the house. And of course, when we talk about the house, we also talk about the kitchen. The space provided for them in society would be their houses, and the space provided for them within their houses would be the kitchen. If women keep to these norms, they are referred to as being pure, chaste, uh, um, and society would be happy with them. Um So this was basically the idea of home. When we go to the novel proper, when we go to Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, we're going to look for examples that reflect these concepts, those tenets and those ideals of home. Before I leave this part, I need to highlight the fact that it wasn't all uh, honey and milk, like they say. Yeah, it is true that the idea of home was widely accepted and everybody was obviously following it. But still, the realities on the ground were different. Uh, um, Outside, so once people step outside their houses or their homes, they see ugly realities in the sense that they feel that they don't feel secure, they feel threatened because of how high the rate of crime was. They see what they see strange faces, because remember, this was the age of the empire. You have people coming from different parts of the world, because England and Britain were you know the center of the financial hub or center of the world, because of the of Britain being at the time a big empire. But it was only natural that when they go out, they see people that they are not familiar with. And because of the fact British people are known for their conservatism, and perhaps I don't want to be unfair to them and refer to the fact that they sometimes they show xenophobic attitudes towards others. Xenophobic means that there is some measure of hatred towards non-whites, non-Christians, non-British. So they would feel threatened and shocked when they see uh, Indians walking down the streets of London, when they see Africans or Chinese in the ports of London and the other, and Liverpool, for example. I'm not sure. I don't want to be judgmental, ya Sarah. Uh, Perhaps it's high time that people started to reconsider those stances. I'm sure you guys are following what is happening in the USA, and the fact that people are starting to reconsider how they do stuff when it comes to races, and this is typical, and this is what was happening in Britain at the time. Uh, um, so they would be shocked, they would feel threatened, and again, this is the mismatch that I was highlighting and talking about. Within the home, there is comfort, there is security and safety, but outside, the realities on the ground are ugly and dismal. And also, another reason why the realities were not as good as they were at home or within the home was simply because we're talking about a period that it was a changing world, where industrialization was at full swing. And of course, when the industrial revolution was in full swing, and instead of having 10 people doing something, you would replace them with a machine. So when you replace people, and people are made redundant, having no jobs, of course they resort to all kinds of yeah, bad practices. They would commit crimes. So again, this also was a source of threat for people who feel comfortable and feel secure at home. So again, the new realities that I am talking about in Britain would have to do with violence, crime, drug addiction, and prostitution. Um, this is as far as the idea of home is concerned. Now we'll move to the idea of approach and how this was dealt with. Um, the idea of abroad is built on the fact that Britain was a big empire. Otherwise, if Britain did not expand beyond its local shores, we wouldn't have spoken about the idea of abroad. But at the time, and during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, who lived for perhaps 50 or 60 or perhaps more years, England or Britain could expand beyond their shores. They, like I said, they went as far as India and the Pacific and other places, also in Africa. And it was only natural that this idea of abroad pops up. There are facets of the empire. You see scenes that reflect the empire in the streets of London and the other British towns and cities. There is always talk about new goods and products imported from those colonies. I mean, tea, sugar, carpets, gold. So whether locals liked it or not, they are surrounded by signs and facets of the empire. Even Queen Victoria herself is an example of the effects of the empire and the effects of abroadness on Britain or local Britain. She herself at one point was receiving lessons in Hindu and in Urdu, and she also had a favored servant by the name of Hafiz Abdul Karim. He was more or less like a personal assistant to her, and he had this small place that he used to live in within the palace. Again, like I said, the idea of separating whatever is home from whatever is abroad is not practical and not realistic because of the how entangled they are together for the reasons that we have mentioned earlier. With this part or with this small item, we conclude talking about the introduction. Now we move all the way to chapter 5. And as you can see, chapter 5 is both about Wuthering Heights and about the concept of home. So again, Wuthering Heights is a novel written by Emily Bronte, and Emily Bronte is a very famous British novelist. And this is one of her novels. I mean, she wrote a number of novels, and Emily Bronte also comes from a long line of novels. I mean, her other sisters wrote novels too. Okay, so Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights, and the concept that we are treating or dealing with is at home. Okay, so very briefly, I need somebody to come to the mic and tell me very briefly, perhaps in a minute or two, what Wuthering Heights is all about. Who would like to use the mic and talk to us about Wuthering Heights? You may want to raise your hand, and when you raise your hand, I can allow you to speak. We have Sarah El Hariri, and I'll approve her. I think. Can you try to talk, ya Sarah? Yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, yes. Hi, how are you?
Hi, fine, alhamdulillah. Actually, Wuthering Heights is about two main families living in Wuthering Heights in a town, actually. Talking about I think the relationships between these two families in Wuthering Heights family, there's actually a strange boy who's brought by the I mean like the grandfather he's brought in to the family, and he's considered as a stranger, gypsy, and talking about how the personality of this boy changes over time to be like against these people, against this family, and like all the difficulties and hardship that he goes through reflects or um, actually it comes negatively on this family from what he is treated um, um, over time and over the years. Even the love story between this boy and the girl of Catherine.
Mm.
It's rejected, of course, and it was seen as I think impossible. Um, yeah, basically like
Okay, that's
and
that's
yeah and
yeah, okay.
the generation how's the like this the relationship this relationship and this strange um um
So you're
the
moving now, you're moving beyond recounting or telling or retelling the story to analysis, and I would like to ask you to stop at this point. Thank you so
sure
much.
sure
You did an excellent job. We'll talk
okay
about
thank you
analysis in a minute. Can we have somebody else, somebody who can pick up what what's our what I forgot her name. I'm sorry. What Sarah I mean somebody who can pick up what Sarah left over, and we have Kamar, and Kamar said that she has read it all. Okay, Summer. Good afternoon or good evening rather, because it's after 6 here in Jeddah. So your mic is enabled, ya Kamar, if you would like to talk, because you were raising your hand. Kamar, if you can hear us. Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Ah, yes, we can. Yes.
Yeah, so as Sarah said, Wuthering Height is about two families living in two different houses in the countryside.
Can you
And
slow
one day the
down a
dad
bit?
comes with an
Can you,
orphan.
Kamar? Can you slow
Yeah,
down a
sure.
bit?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, sure. One day the dad comes with an orphan, supposed from London, and as an orphan, I mean, he feels like an outsider, but the family kind of tried to welcome him, except one of the brothers. He feels kind of hostile toward him because the dad treats him better, and he's always like, take care of this orphan and so on. And then the dad dies, and
Hmm.
after first the dad dies, and after the dad dies, the son goes back, and he decides to treat the boy in a very bad way. He degrade him to a servant, and he start like treating him really badly. And throughout this whole thing, he still keep his friendship with the girl Catherine, like Sarah said. However, at some point, Catherine and him runs away to the other house in the family, and there Catherine get into an accident, and the family takes her into the house. And through this whole thing, Catherine goes through a character change, I believe. She start treating after she comes back to Wuthering Height. She changed with him. She started seeing him as a dirty person. She commented on his appearance. All these stuff she didn't care about before start like caring. She start caring about. She start pinpointing like, oh, he's dirty, also, and so on.
Yeah.
And at some point, they end up the relationship, and she actually marries the son of the other family, thinking about it, and this is gonna take her to a higher place. This is gonna make her a she gonna live a better life with him, and so on.
Okay.
Um,
That's
and
yeah.
and and then Heathcliff, which is the orphan boy,
Hmm.
he leaves and he goes abroad. No one really knows where he went. He comes back richer,
Hmm.
better. He looks like a gentleman, and now he wants revenge.
Okay. Yeah. So that great. Thank you, Kamar, for those
You're welcome.
very interesting
You want me to?
insights.
You want
Yeah.
me to complete? I read the whole
No.
book.
No, 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 no. We don't want to spoil it for the others. We're
Yeah, sure.
by highlighting aspects in the novel, we're trying to help them so that when they read them, they don't feel that they are strange or stuff. Because the novel, make no mistake about it, is not a traditional sense. And this
No,
is
no.
what lots of critics have been saying about it over the years. The fact that
Yeah, when
has
I read it, I was gonna ask you if it's
mm,
like, is it supposed to be to give me this kind of like ideas? Because it's
you mean the feelings that and the impressions that you
yeah,
came
yeah,
out
yeah,
with?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You're well read, yeah, Kamar, and I know you personally. I think you have read so many novels. What's the difference, if any? How different is this novel from the novels that you have read over the years, if any?
I think one of the biggest difference is the fact this novel takes into generation.
The idea that you have different generations.
Yes, the
Uh,
idea you have different generation, and the idea that one of the generation fails to survive while the other generation actually survive. The
mhm.
second generation survive. They don't have the same ending as the first generation.
Uh-huh.
And and another idea, when you read it according to the background, you feel somehow it's contradictory in a way, like the ideas of home and
Mm.
stuff.
Mhm.
When you read it about the two homes,
Mhm.
you feel like one of the home is kind of dark, there's violence in
Yeah,
it and stuff.
dysfunctional,
Dysfunctional homes, yeah.
dysfunctional homes and dysfunctional families. Yeah, that you're
Yes,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's a very smart remark. Yes, yes, yes.
and it's weird because according to the background we read that home is a safe and a secure place and a comfort zones kind of a idea concept.
Yes,
So
and
that
this is
that
what
really
makes it different, and that's when you read the reviews on and about the novel, you are going to, yeah, you wouldn't be shocked to know that people were not happy with the novel, and also the fact that perhaps Emily Bronte was expecting the backlash. That's why she was writing under a pseudonym, what a pseudonym, a pen name.
yeah, it's a
Normally,
fake name.
a fake name. Perhaps she was expecting this kind of negative reaction to the novel because of, uh, suffice it to say that the novel was always described as having elemental passions and feelings. Elemental means very stormy feelings. You can be in love with other people, but you wouldn't go to their tombs and their graves and try to stay there because you think that by staying there, um, the other person is alive and kicking, and you can still resume the relationship and all this. This is very
Yeah,
strange
yeah.
and very weird. We have so many examples, like I said, I don't want to spoil it for you. I want you to read it for yourself, enjoy it. I mean, as dark as it is, it has interesting
The main question that was in my mind was like, was she supporting the Victorian ideas or was she against them? That was the first thought I had when I read the book.
not really. If you ask me, she it's not about supporting. It's about being different. She was different. She was giving she was giving us something different. And again, that would explain why people were not so happy about the novel at the time, because it kind of attacked and challenged their sensitivities and sensibilities. They are used to novels that are light, that talk about love relationships, that talk about people getting married and living happily ever after at the end. But we don't have that in
No.
this novel. That's why
And
it.
and we have a lot of marriages that are not happy, like Isabella and
Yes,
Heathcliff's
lots of, yeah,
marriage.
like I said, the idea of dysfunctional families was not common at the time. We're talking about harmony, we're talking about walking into home and you forget about the dangers and the threats that are outside. This is not happening, and this is
It's the
actually
opposite.
when look with the narrator, because it's a novel, it has a narrator. It has, by the way, more than one narrator.
Yeah, it has
He
the maid
himself was
and
shocked
Lockwood.
when he remember he is from I'll give you
London.
the mic, Noof, in a minute. Noof wants to add something, and I'll give her the mic in a minute. I just
Sana,
want.
can I ask a question? Can I
Can
just
can
ask
I
one
finish
question?
my line of thought,
Yeah,
and
sure.
then
Yeah, sure.
you are
Sure,
on
sure.
your own? I
Yeah.
was I was talking about Lockwood. Remember, typical of novels, and this is something that we're going to highlight. When you talk about novels, you talk about aspects or elements of the novel that makes it different from non-novels or from plays or poetry. You normally have characters. You have, of course, you have theme like in the other genres. So you have characters, you have theme, you have setting, right? Yeah, point of view, and I am referring to this aspect, point of view. Point of view means that you have there is a narrator to a novel, somebody who narrates, who tells us what is happening, and you normally have first person or third person narrators, and through those narrators we get to know about this element that we call point of view or perspective. From which perspective, from which angle of vision the narration is done. Yani going back to the idea that Lockwood, the one of the narrators, because we have Nellie also as another narrator at one point. Lockwood was so shocked when he first went to Wuthering Heights, when he went to the house itself. By the way, Wuthering Heights is the name of the novel, and it is also the name of one of the two competing houses. Remember, we have two houses in the novel. Okay, so when he went in order to stay in Wuthering Heights, he was treated very badly. He was having big dreams and big expectations. He is from the north. He is from the south, and the south is normally rich and educated, and he goes to the north in order to explore the north. Sometimes you have people who are interested in whatever is weird and whatever is primitive, and the simplicity of life. The simplicity of life means that he has to go to the north of England which he did. So when he went there, he was having big and great expectations about the behavior of people. He was under the impression that he's going to find people who are simple, people who are easy to deal with. You remember the people that Wordsworth used to celebrate and talk about in his poems. Uh, but when he went there and he went into the house, he was met with all kinds of arrogance, all kinds of bad treatment. Again, this is shocking, given the fact that we're talking about a house or a home, and a house and a home in the Victorian age was about comfort, security, uh, um, you know, being a refuge away from the hustle and bustle of busy life outside, with its heightened levels of crime and all these kinds of and violence and all these kinds of things. So Noor had something to add. If you would like to come to the mic, and Noof, I'm sorry, Noof Ahmed, do you have something to say? Yeah, let me. Yeah, okay, Noof, go ahead. Noof, the mic is yours. Okay. So if you mean, I mean, it's off and you cannot make it activated, or are you trying, or what? Yeah, you see how beautiful the insights are when you read. Okay, I'm hopeful that the problem is not from my end. Okay, because I enabled you. It's okay. It's okay. Um, okay. So as you can see, the more you are involved and engaged with the novel, the more examples and the more illustrations you can come out with. Remember, you also need to read the play against the background of the age, against the prevailing concepts. I mean, like I said, at home and abroad, and see how different the novel is. I mean, different. I mean, whether it's moving within the parameter set for it by the Victorian age in terms of characteristics, or is it saying something different? For obviously, Wuthering Heights so far is saying something else, different, and that would explain the reason why it was not well received when it was first published. Of course, over time, people are going to start to realize how different, in a positive sense, the novel is, and they're going to kind of recognize the fact that Emily Bronte was ahead of her time. Am I making sense so far? Okay. So let's talk about the aims of the chapter very quickly. So one of the aims would be to explore the idea of home in the text. By in the text, of course, we are referring to Wuthering Heights, and begin considering the idea of approach. So we're going to fully talk about the idea of home, and then make the transition to the idea of approach. But the idea of approach has its own chapters, so it's going to be dealt with in complete details in the upcoming chapter. One of the aims would be to guide readers through Wuthering Heights and its critical and reception history. How people received the novel, and like I said, you either like something or you don't like it based on what you have seen. So it's going to be natural if we start to feel friction, if we start to feel that some critics are not happy with the novel for obvious reasons. Now that we have read the novel, now that we have read novels from the period, now that we're going to also read novels from the period after this novel, we're going to see how heavy-handed and how difficult and challenging in terms of ideas this novel is. You cannot compare it, for example, to The Sign of Four or The Beach of Felicia. It is true that the other novels have ideas and issues, but those wouldn't compare with the complexity that is presented in Wuthering Heights. طيب. We're going to introduce you to some of the main elements of realism and romance relevant to analyzing novels. So this is technique. When we finish perhaps talking about the ideas and the issues that are being presented in the novel, we can move to the techniques that Emily Bronte is using. One of those techniques would be realism, and we'll talk about what realism means. And also romance. Romance here does not mean love relationship. Romance is a genre in and of itself, as we will discover. Finally, we'll explore different facets of or the overarching concept of the reader. Again, the concept of the reader is continuing with us. Okay. Let me ask you again. Like I said, we're reading the novel, and at the same time, we are reading the textbook. So, have you by any chance read the chapter 5? If you have done so, please write 5. Write 5 if you are. Okay, Kamar read chapter 5. Noof also. Nabila, that's interesting. Rama, that's amazing. Okay, good. So, so yeah, excellent. Sarah Al-Hariri and Nermeen and Shireen. You guys are doing an excellent job, and I am so proud of you. Okay. I will do two things. I will go and pray for 5 minutes, and then when we come back, we can always talk about what the chapter is all about. So make it short and sweet, 5 minutes, so that we can finish this chapter off tonight. Okay, 5 minutes, everyone. Okay. يلا السلام عليكم everyone. Are we back? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, good. Okay. Hi Yara. Hi everyone. Rinad, Nabila, Razan. Okay, Arish, and there was also Fat. Okay, طيب. Okay. So we're talking about chapter 5, like we agreed. Okay. So, okay. So let's pick up what we have left over. A couple of minutes, not a couple of minutes, perhaps 10 minutes ago. Somebody was having challenges. Yeah, I mean, walking into the room again. She got, I think, uh, bounced off. I'm hopeful that she could. I mean, I sent her the link. I'm hopeful that she is in again. Do we have her? Can we help her in any way, Gama? Can you hear me? Okay. So did can we help? Can we help her? Is she around? Could she come back in? I mean, somebody was having issues. I mean, entering into the room, she was somehow kicked out, and she said this in the group, and I sent her the link. So if somebody can volunteer and talk to her in the group. طيب. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Fahd. Okay. طيب. So let's go back to our business. Um, Again, let me just remind you that we're doing chapter 5, and chapter 5 is about Wuthering Heights, the novel itself, right? And we're talking about the home aspect. And next time when we meet, we'll talk about Wuthering Heights, but we'll talk about the abroad aspect of the novel. So again, when you read the novel and you have all the associations of home now from the previous chapter, the introduction, where we spoke at length about what home means and the interconnection between whatever is home and whatever is abroad. Okay. Again, if we talk about the novel structurally, the novel, uh, um, and this is typical of novels, has more than one narrator. This is not typical. I mean, having narrators in a novel is having a narrator is obviously typical, but having more than one narrator is not typical. And the reason why we're having more, and this is again, this is part of the challenge that Emily Bronte is posing, the fact that she has more than one narrator, and they comment on perhaps similar events, but their interpretation of the events is obviously different. You need to know, for example, that Lookwood is a stranger to the family. You need to also know that he didn't survive the shock that he received at the beginning. So most of his interpretation of the events that he was witness to are marred and are colored by the prejudice and the anger that he earned because of how he was treated at the beginning. Nellie has her own biases, but her own biases towards the family because she has been working with them as the manager of the house for years and years. When people ask her about Heathcliff, for example, she wouldn't say that he is bad and stuff. He would compare him to kings in other countries, an African or an Indian king. Uh, uh, um, I'm not sure she was talking about him as a king or a prince. Something in this neighborhood, in other words. Again, you also need to. It's a lot of comparisons that you guys are making as you proceed in this novel. You compare the two houses, you compare the two or more narrators that we have, you compare the different characters, you compare the different behaviors of the different people in the novel. So so somebody's asking, let me check the Sarah is saying we have the voice of Lookwood, Nellie, and Isabella. We can't rely on any of them. Yeah. and Catherine's voice in her life. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you have a multiplicity of voices, very interlocking and very sometimes confusing. And this is again, you don't have a love story, a traditional light-hearted love story where you have a number of obstacles and then things kind of clear out and the couple gets reconciled and get married and live happily ever after. This is not happening in this novel, unfortunately. Not unfortunately. I mean, she has. This is a statement that Emily Bronte is making. She is ahead of her time in terms of not adopting, traditional themes and ideas. She is perhaps saying that human nature is more complex than the eye meets. Perhaps she has those insights into human nature. This is before the appearance and the advent of the novels of psychology and stream of consciousness, and the novels of the interior and the inner recesses of people and human beings. But in this sense, she may be considered as a pioneer, somebody who is starting something that only later generations are able to appreciate. Uh, okay, so again, like I said, one of the aims of the chapter would be to see how the novel was received when it was first, published in 1847. Those who have read the chapter, I would like to perhaps listen to what they have to say about the reception. So, how was the reception of the novel? If somebody wants to come to the mic and share insights with us, he or she is more than welcome. Any? Okay, so obviously nobody wants to use the mic. Okay, so can you type? If you don't want to use the mic, can you type? Yeah, how the novel was received, ya Sarah? Received by the critics at the time. There were Arch is saying that there was a wide variety of responses. Can we talk about them, Arch? Yeah, okay. So some of them, according to Arch, were positive. Some saw it as refreshing and original. This is what Noof is saying. They saw it as, you mean a third or perhaps a fourth category of critics and people saw it as a dark novel. Yeah, this is Noof. Yes. Others saw it as extreme, and they would refer to it as being coarse. When something is coarse, it's harsh. It's not smooth. Yeah, Sarah wants to say something. So let's listen to what Sarah has to say about this.
Yeah,
Uh,
actually, hello.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, some critics or some readers they underappreciate the work of Bronte, and of course some misunderstood her work at
Uh-huh.
that time.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, because she writes something different.
Yeah.
She writes something unfamiliar to them at that time.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
So it was disagreed by some, and it was not accepted also by others. It was seen like too extreme
Yeah.
to them, and very violence, like a lot of violence,
Hmm.
a lot of, as I said, extremities for
Yeah.
them at that time.
Yes.
Um, yeah, actually, there were certain positive views, but I think it was not as much as the negative ones.
Yeah. So yeah, this is true. I mean, what Sarah is saying is correct. The fact that yeah, there were or there was a great deal of negative backlash, if you like. People were, I mean, they were not used to this kind of treatment when it comes to novel writing. They wanted
Yeah,
light-hearted stuff, and they didn't get that. They
yeah,
had
exactly.
they have seen strange people. They are familiar with white characters. If you think of
Yeah,
the
simple
character of
and
Heathcliff, for example, he is described as being dark.
mhm.
Nobody knows his origins, whether he is from England or from somewhere else. Somewhere else, he is stranger to the family. He's stranger to the whole town. He's stranger even to the entire Victorian society. I mean, the way he looks. Remember that we're going to have a great deal of talk about this, about how different Heathcliff, the central character, is. He is so different. So those who have read the novel, uh, w- how much do you know about Heathcliff in terms of physique? I'm not talking about his manners. I'm not talking about how he behaves. I'm talking about how he was described by the narrators or the narrators, how he was described. If somebody would like to come to the mic and share this part with us, Kamal perhaps, because she has read the whole novel. Okay, or Sarah again.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
He was described as dark, as gypsy, as dirty, and as morose.
Okay, so when we describe
But
somebody as
yeah,
okay, let's agree on that. Let's agree on that. There is something called mainstream. Mainstream. When we talk about Europeans, for example, when we talk about England, so a mainstream individual in England would be somebody who is white, right? Somebody who is
blonde.
blonde, green-eyed, right? Okay.
Yes.
The same applies to women, of course. Okay. So my question is um, whether Heathcliff fits this image. Is he white? Is he green-eyed?
No,
What
he's not
about?
mainstream.
Yeah, he's not mainstream. In other words, okay. So he's not mainstream, which is again very strange. Which is again not to the taste or the liking of people like the English people, who are very conservative, who like I said, xenophobic in a sense, who doesn't like the unfamiliar, right? Who had reservations on seeing dark individuals, Chinese individuals, Indian individuals walking down the streets of London. Remember when we spoke about the idea of home? And they would resort to their houses and their homes in order to have the security that they miss in the street. Okay, so to have a novel where the central and the main character is not mainstream, is not white, is not green or blue-eyed, right? But this is some kind of shock that uh, uh, um, that people or the readers at the time are receiving, right? So it's only natural that for the most part the reviews were not that encouraging or inviting. Okay, it's not only the character. It's not only Heathcliff.
Dr.
Yeah.
Saleh,
Yes.
can I
Go
say
ahead.
one thing?
Yeah. Okay.
Even in the beginning of the book, when the father brought Heathcliff into home, people like the people in the house referred to him as it, as an
Yes.
object, as a
See
frightful
how
object.
objective. Yeah. And this is very serious. And something. You see how relatable this is to what is happening now. It's also racist, right? You're
Yes, of
even
course.
denying the guy or this individual the pronoun that he deserves. It's it, not him, right?
Yeah, and they said, and the kids themselves were like, we don't want to sleep with this frightful creature.
Yes. Again, and I'm trying to account for the fact that the novel was not received well at the very beginning. Okay, so again, try we're trying to cite examples to support the idea, um, or to support the reasons why we're trying to find reasons why the novel was not well received, and one element would be the character, the fact that the main character is not mainstream, is not familiar, is somebody whose origins are unknown, right? So it's not only the character of Heathcliff, also there is a great, I mean, his behavior, right? If you move from how he looks like to his behavior is also very questionable. His behavior, his coarse, he's violent, right? Am I correct?
You're right, you're correct.
Yes. Okay, I think Sarah wants to say something. Let me allow her. Okay, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, Dr. Samhat. Just only about about Heathcliff. He was a dark-skinned gypsy, but in figure, like he was portrayed as a handsome figure,
Hmm.
and
It, it
in
it
some
depends on.
places,
By the way, it depends on.
yes,
Yani, let's be very careful about this part. Who is
uh-huh.
describing him as handsome? Uh, um, I'm not sure that I have read this part, but perhaps it may be Nelly because of the. Again, Nelly has been in the house for quite
Mhm.
some time, and she has her sympathies with Heathcliff and the other members of the house. Am I
And
correct?
maybe Catherine too.
And of course,
Uh,
Catherine is a woman in love. You wouldn't blame
Yeah,
her,
when she
right?
described him, yeah, of course, yeah,
Yes.
sure. When
Uh,
she described him, compared him to her husband,
mhm.
like he was like he had an erect and handsome figure,
Mm.
and like yeah, but in manners, yeah, I think he was harsh. He was violent. Yeah,
Let me
this is
take
what I think.
let me take the conversation or the argument to a different direction. Do you think he's justified in what he said? Do you think that he is more sinned against sinning? Have you heard this expression when we say that somebody is more sinned against than sinning? It means that other people sinned against him more than he sinned against them. Do you think that he is partly justified in his actions and reactions? Do you feel any sympathies towards him, in other words?
Like according to his history, according to his origins, to what he's brought from, like he has some um,
Justifications, you mean?
justifications, but like the way he was raised up, the consequences, the environment, I think everything affected him.
You would, yeah. Let's listen to what Kamar has to say about this part.
Dr. Sameh, the
Yes.
person who described him as handsome was actually Lockwood, who
Mm-hmm.
comes from London, who
Ah.
probably saw him as someone mysterious and someone
Yes.
outside of the out of the atmosphere of the
Yeah,
north
like
and
I
the
told you, remember
yeah.
when we started talking about Lockwood, we said that Lockwood is this kind of person or individual who sees nice stuff in strangeness and in primitiveness. Remember, he is from the south, from the educated and the rich south. Why would he go to the north unless he likes those fantastic things? He likes to mix with the poor people, talk to them. We have this, right? Sometimes you have people who are, well educated, and they go and for example, and talk to people who are not very well educated. They listen to them, they mix with them, they go out with them because they like them. They like
Exactly like
they go to very strange places, even dangerous places,
Mhm.
like Europeans at one point going to Africa and appreciating the beauty of wildlife over there. Okay, so this is perhaps why Lockwood was at the beginning infatuated with the character of Heathcliff, because he is
So
uh,
here we have, Doctor,
yes.
similar, I think, situation between Lockwood and between his Cliff. Like he was brought from Liverpool
Mm,
to the north, and this the Lockwood he was like also coming from, I think, the south to
mm.
the north, or
You mean you're talking about whom? About Heathcliff?
yeah, like he was brought from Liverpool
Yes, yes.
to this weather to this
Wuthering Heights. I'm in
Wuthering
the
Heights,
estate
and
itself. Yes.
yeah, and Lookwood, he was also coming from outside, like from abroad.
I mean, nobody knows about that. This is part of the challenge and the dilemma, that nobody
Mm.
knows from where he originated. Okay, and this is part of the strangeness, and this is part of the reason why people are reacting negatively towards him. He is orphaned. He is strange. He doesn't look like them. He doesn't behave the way they do. Right? Nabila is saying Bronte addressed the issue of racial discrimination. Absolutely, yes, yes, yeah, Nabil. Yes, Rania Muhammad is saying log out and log in again. Okay.
Dr. Sameh,
Yes.
can I ask a question?
Uh,
So Liquid visits Wuthering Height a second time, despite the fact that he was not welcomed. Did
mm.
he do it because he was interested in how mysterious the place was?
Well, if this is your nature, you wouldn't say no. You wouldn't be kind of if people treat you badly,
Probably, yeah, you wouldn't come back.
you no, you would try again. Yeah, you would try again, but again, we're stressing the fact that all his judgments and assessments were colored by the first shock that he received at the very beginning. فhe is, as a narrator, we call him unreliable. He is an unreliable narrator because he's not objective. He gets or he got influenced and affected by how he was first treated. Of course, it was bad treatment by who treat. I mean, was it Isabella, the or young Catherine? I think young Catherine treated him bad.
Young Catherine
Yeah,
treated
he
him
treated
badly. He
him.
tried to help her.
Yes.
He tried to help her, and she was like, "I don't need your help."
Okay. Rania Muhammad is saying, "Sorry, doctor, I'm talking with." Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Arwa is saying that the sound is cutting. I'm not sure if this applies to everyone. Can we ask? Are you facing challenges with the sound, ya Jamaa? Everyone? No. Okay, so Arwa is kindly, I mean, invited to go out and come back. Perhaps that would solve the problem, hopefully. Okay, good. Okay, so again, we're talking about the reception of the novel, which was for the most part negative. Does it mean that we don't have positive reviews? Of course, there were, and they were all pointing to the originality of the novel. Originality means it's something unprecedented. It's something not. She was not mimicking or imitating other writers, which is to her credit, of course. She is starting something that lots of other later generation writers are going to do. So she was ahead of her time, as a matter of fact. Um, Wuthering Heights is domestic novel, but there are more abroad. There are more things that are abroad than uh, uh, we may think and imagine. Do you agree with this statement? When I say that it is true that it is a domestic novel. Do you know what a domestic novel is, right? Yeah, Abdurrahman is obsessed with the idea that the novel is impossible to read and it's very long and everything. Yet at least we're discussing it, and this would make it يعني accessible. Yeah, Abdurrahman. Yeah, and try to do your best. It's okay. Yeah, just what's the big deal? Yani we have done that when we were your age, and we used to read so many things, and they were also bulky and everything. Just take it easy, yeah, Abdul Rahman. Just take it easy. Uh, okay. So again, yes, we're talking about the domesticity of the novel. We're describing the novel as a domestic novel. Domestic means that it talks about the internal affairs or the private affairs of a family or a number of families. Does this apply to the novel? Absolutely, right? But where is the abroad element in the novel, if any? So it is a domestic, if you judge by what we have seen and what we have read. Yeah, it's about the internal affairs of a family or two and the different generations of these two families, right? This is very domestic. Okay, but there are, I mean, elements that belong to outside those two families, beyond those two families, right? And this is the abroad part or element. So when we have characters like Lookwood, like Amal is saying, when we have Heathcliff, the character of Heathcliff himself, and the journeys or the trips that he engages on. Remember, at one point, because he was not accepted, he has to leave the entire town or city and go. I mean, we don't know where he went. Did he leave the country altogether, or did he went to Liverpool or to another city? What is strange is that when he came back after 3 or 4 years, he was rich. This is this is even stranger. You don't get rich in 2 or 3 years, right? That would give you the impression that perhaps he did something wrong. Perhaps he stole money. Perhaps he killed somebody, right? Isn't that, yeah, right? So this atmosphere of strangeness and unfamiliarity, if you like, is the reason why we're saying what we're saying about the novel as being, you know, domestic, it is true, but it is also or it has also elements of the canny and the uncanny. Very strange, very weird stuff taking place. Sarah wants to say something. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Doctor. The concept of abroad also applies on, I think, the housekeeper, Nellie Dean.
Mm,
Like as she is, she used to be the housemaid in both houses.
mm.
So she has the knowledge about the people, the members of the families of the two houses, and of course, like she is the outsider in her origins with respect to them.
Yeah,
If am I
no,
correct?
yeah, you. I mean, this is nice. Nice. The idea of analyzing and yani seeing stuff that other people may not see. This is good, and these are yeah, yeah, very good. Thank you, Sarah. This is a very good point. Um, okay. So, Kamar, yani keep it short and sweet,
Doctor,
Kamar. Yes. Okay. Go
yeah,
ahead.
the Dr. Samih, also when Isabella leaves Wuthering Height and goes to London, that's also abroad.
Yeah, yeah. There is obviously more to abroad than just physical journeys. Let me just warn you. We're talking about there is we're focusing on the abstract level of things. Okay, so it is true. Yeah, yeah. You can also be talking about physical stuff, but you would be more inclined to talk about abstract stuff, abstract ideas, like again when we spoke about how he was treated, and this would be a reason why he would behave the way he did and stuff like that. So, like everybody is saying, we have two levels when it comes to abroad. We have the physical level where we actually have people going on journeys from one place to another. Lookwood, for example, Lookwood is coming from London in the south and is coming all the way to the north. This is a movement, right? And then when he moves from one house to another, okay, when people move from one house to another, when Catherine leaves I mean, Wuthering Heights behind and goes to the other house and gets married, and this is also a movement, right? Again, when Heathcliff leaves the whole country behind, if he did, and he goes and then works, and then after a while he comes back rich and stuff like that. Okay, so different levels. So it is true that the novel is domestic, but there is obviously you know elements of abroad in it. So the incidents are too coarse and disagreeable to be attractive, the very best being improbable with a moral taint. Do you agree that there is a moral taint to this novel? Moral taint means that something is not morally correct. How so? You may want to use the chat area. Moral taint means that if you have a white dress or a white shirt, there are taints. Taints are perhaps black spots in there. So what is it uh, that is happening that is spoiling the image that we may have? Okay, in a sense, yes. No, I wouldn't. No. no, yeah. I mean, Qamar is saying that we have ghosts. Ghosts have nothing to do with morality, obviously. Nov is saying Heathcliff's or Heathcliff has an unhealthy obsession with Kathy. Yes, yeah, and that would bring about a number of complications. Yes. Sarah is saying that his their love or this love is not clear. I'm not sure what whether the word clear is the right word when it comes to I mean relationships. Kathy loves Heathcliff's even though she is married. Yeah, this is a moral taint. Yeah, what Noof is saying is correct. The fact that um, you know Kathy is married, but she shouldn't be having or nursing any admiration or love for Heathcliff. Fahd is saying the discrimination of Heathcliff was uncalled for, which in turn made the entire idea of him seem off. Yeah, that well said. Yeah, thank you, Fahd. Um, I have not read the book yet. No problem. We're waiting for you. Take your time, but don't don't take your sweet time. I mean, just يعني be quick about it. You're doing an excellent job, Fahd. Thank you so much. Nabila is saying the discrimination of Heathcliff by Mrs. Earnshaw. Yes, yes. Okay, okay, good. The idea of revenge, the fact that, and this is actually what some people are referring to. They are referring to the fact that there is a measure of unjustifiable pain. The pain that is there is not justified. I mean, in other words, they are saying that it could have been avoided, right? But again, يعني this is what Summer, yeah, Kamar is saying, and I happen to agree with her. This um, sense of revenge, overwhelming sense of revenge that Heathcliff lives with. He spares nobody, right? This is also uh, uh, a moral thing. People are meant to forgive each other, right? So somebody did something wrong to you over the years. I mean, you relent. Yeah, I mean, you perhaps give him him or her for that matter, of course. You give him the benefit of the doubt. You give him another chance. But this is not happening in the novel, right? That's why we're saying that it has elemental passions. Elemental passions means, uh, you know, you don't have, there is no flexibility to it. Nothing is flexible about the novel and its different characters, right? Noof is saying that he even wanted Kathy to be tortured in hell through his love to her. Yes. Yeah, lots of, again, um, and the villainy not leading to results sufficient to justify. So there is a great deal of unjustified villainy. Okay. Whether you agree or not, this is besides the point. I mean, uh, everyone has a right to his opinion. You might find him justified, but again, he is extreme in his reaction and his revenge. This is the problem. This is what we're saying. I mean, he has this exaggerated sense of revenge. Again, we would go back to the idea that the novel was not appreciated during the time, and the fact that it was misunderstood. But again, this not without good reasons. To the extent that you may want to believe that Emily Bronte wrote the novel using a pseudonym because of perhaps the fact that she knows that her novel is extreme, and there are there is a great deal of violence. Again, you would also find people who said that the novel was original, and the imaginative power is overwhelming. This is referring, of course, to Emily Bronte. To the extent that a critic would say a critic saw the author as having the making of a great dramatic artist. See? Okay, we spoke about the fact that there is a moral taint to it. Uh, I would like to refer to one of the also the reviews where a critic by the name of Henry Corley, he would describe the home at Wuthering Heights as a prison which might be pictured from life. Let us hope the author will spare us further interior so gloomy as the one here elaborated with such dismal minuteness. See? Yeah, read them because they give you insights. You see how, the writer of the chapter is a critic, so you might as well know how to you imitate her in how she chooses the extracts and how she comments on them. Okay. Anyway, like I said, what is interesting about this review would be the idea of dismal. You look at this phrase, dismal minuteness. Minuteness, you know what minuteness, or when I say that, when I say minute details that are very small, very small. She or he doesn't leave any details behind. So we're referring to the novel by one of the critics as having this. There is obviously nothing wrong with having minute details, but when those minute details are dismal means gloomy and dark. This is where the problem, where there is a problem. So dark, according to this critic. And we're having an activity where there is a great deal of talk about this minuteness, this dismal minuteness that this critic was talking about. There is a great deal of talk about the interior of the house and how stuff is organized and arranged in a certain way. It gives you the impression of loftiness, but again, when Lockwood talks about them, he doesn't feel too comfortable about what he is seeing. He believes that something is looming on the horizon, negative as it may sound. Again, we're looking at events from the lenses or the eyes of Lockwood. Again, Lockwood, before he saw and treated the members of the family, he was very excited. But over time, when they start to deal with him, he's going to change beyond recognition in his assessment of what is going on. Look at the description. I mean, if you go to this part, on pages 2 and 3, the description is, we're talking about what? We're talking about guns hanging from I don't know where. We're talking about, uh, you know, even the description of those guns as being villainous old guns. Villainous mean from villain, evil, right? He senses something. Um, and he starts to talk about the characters, and he refers to them as having rustic decency. So they might be polite, but in a rustic way. This is, of course, before the encounter with young Catherine. Oh, is it 8 already? Okay. 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 So I think our pace is a little bit slow. So we'll have to quicken things up a little bit. يعني I'm happy that you guys find it interesting. Okay. So what I want you to do, thank you, Sarah. What I want you to do for next time, I would like you to finish off chapter 5. Next time I'll talk about it again in very, I'll give highlights, and I will listen to what you have to say in terms of insights and revelations, and then we make the transition to the next chapter. So you guys need to read the novel as much as you can, and also to read the textbook, the chapters that we have. About the TMA, the TMA will be posted shortly. I'll post it in perhaps half an hour. I have received it from the GCC, and I'll have it posted in half an hour, inshallah. Okay, is that clear? Do you guys have any questions before I leave? Okay, so your assignment would be to read 5, okay, along with the chapters in the novel. Okay, on this note and with this item, we come to the end of today's or tonight's class. Thank you so much, and it was nice meeting you this evening. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bye bye.